What if I told you that the fate of an entire civilization was decided not in the grand palaces of Constantinople, but in a dusty, hot ravine on the edge of the desert? On that day, as the sun rose over the Yarmouk River, the world stood on the threshold of irreversible changes that we still feel today. Emperor Heraclius, ruler of the greatest power of his time, had no idea that his brilliant legions were marching into a trap from which there was no escape. This was not just a battle for territory or resources, but a clash between two completely different worlds, two philosophies and two faiths. History remembers many battles, but only a few of them are capable of redrawing the map of the world so radically and forever. The Byzantine Empire, which seemed like an unbreakable rock, faced a force that it had long considered just an annoying nuisance on its borders. Watch the video to the end, and you'll find out how a sandstorm and one man's genius brought the superpower of the ancient world to its knees.
The path is clear.
What if I told you that everything you believed about the invincibility of Roman weapons turned out to be untrue? On the Yarmouk Plateau, it was not just two armies that met, but two diametrically opposed military machines. The Byzantine army represented the pinnacle of military thought of the time, the heir to the Roman legions with centuries of tradition of discipline. It was a heavy ironclad machine that moved slowly but inexorably, like a steamroller sweeping away everything in its path. The soldiers were professionals, receiving salaries, equipment, and provisions from the bottomless imperial treasury. Their tactics were based on maintaining formation, dense phalanxes, and the interaction of infantry with heavy cavalry. Opposing them was a force that Roman strategists had long refused to take seriously. The Arab army had no supply trains, no complex siege engines, no shiny armor standardized by the state. These were desert people for whom war was not a profession, but a way of life and a form of service to a higher purpose. Their main advantage was their incredible mobility and ability to appear where they were least expected. They were accustomed to deprivation and could go for days on a handful of dates and a sip of water, which made their logistics invisible to the enemy. The Byzantines relied on the power of their strike and the strength of their armor, hoping to crush their enemy in direct combat. The Arabs, on the other hand, practiced pinpoint tactics, maneuverable warfare, and rapid cavalry raids. They knew that in open battle they had no chance against imperial steel. Therefore, their task was to turn the battle into chaos, where individual skill and speed mattered more than formation. It was a confrontation between a heavy hammer and a sharp saber, stone and wind. The Byzantine command was hamstrung by a complex hierarchy, court intrigues, and fear of the emperor's wrath. Generals often competed with each other, afraid to show initiative that could cost them their careers or their heads. Orders went through a long process of approval, which made the response of the huge army slow and clumsy. At critical moments, when instant decisions were needed, the Roman machine stalled, wasting precious time. In the Muslim camp, there was a completely different atmosphere of brotherhood and religious fervor. Each warrior felt part of a single organism, where the commander was first among equals. Their discipline was based not on fear of punishment, but on a deep inner conviction that their cause was just. This gave them a tremendous moral advantage, allowing them to hold their ground where others would have faltered and fled. The desert wind was already beginning to sweep away the traces of a great civilization, but the proud commanders did not yet see this. I would be very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think? Can high motivation compensate for a lack of heavy weaponry? Write about it in the comments and subscribe to the channel. Are you ready to learn the truth about how the most formidable army of that era was assembled? Emperor Heraclius, realizing the seriousness of the threat, decided to assemble forces the likes of which the world had not seen in centuries. He emptied the treasury, called up reservists, and hired troops from all corners of his vast empire. In Antioch, where the emperor's headquarters were located, work was in full swing day and night to organize this colossal army. It was a logistical feat that required the full force of the Byzantine state apparatus. Tens of thousands of soldiers of various nationalities and languages rallied under the banner of the cross. Among them were heavy Armenian infantrymen, renowned for their fortitude and ability to withstand blows. Marching alongside them were detachments of Christian Arabs from the Ghassanid tribe, who knew the enemy's tactics and the desert as well as the invaders themselves. Slavic mercenaries and experienced veterans of the Balkan Wars arrived from the north. It was a truly international army, united only by their oath to the emperor and gold. The size of the Byzantine army is still debated by historians, but it far exceeded the forces of the Muslims. According to the most conservative estimates, the imperial forces numbered between 40 and 80,000 professional soldiers. It was an avalanche of steel, men, and horses, seemingly capable of crushing any enemy simply by its weight. Huge convoys of supplies, weapons, and tents stretched for many kilometers, raising columns of dust to the heavens. Command of this motley crowd was entrusted to the Armenian commander Vagan. He was an experienced military leader, but his authority was limited by the presence of other influential generals. Triftiros, commander of the regular troops, and Jabala, leader of the Ghassanids, had their own views on how to wage war. This multi-headed leadership created hidden cracks in the monolith of the imperial army even before the battle began. Emperor Heraclius personally developed the strategy, staying in the rear and coordinating the movements of the corps. His plan was grandiose, to surround and destroy the Arab troops with a simultaneous strike from several directions. He wanted to impose a general battle in which the numerical and technical superiority of the Romans would be the decisive factor. Heraclius believed that one powerful blow would put an end to Arab expansion once and for all. Vagan understood all these problems and tried to act cautiously, avoiding unnecessary risks. He would have preferred to wear down the enemy with maneuvers, but pressure from Constantinople demanded a decisive victory. Politics interfered with strategy, forcing the general to make decisions that were dictated not by military necessity, but by court intrigues. He led his army south toward destiny, carrying the weight of responsibility for the entire empire on his shoulders. Do you think money could buy loyalty in that situation? Watch the video to the end, and in the next chapter, you will find out who opposed this armada. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of military genius? At the head of the Arab army was a man whose name had already become legendary, Khalid ibn al-Walid. He was called the Sword of Allah and was one of the few commanders in history who never lost a battle. Khalid possessed a unique gift for seeing the entire battlefield, anticipating the enemy's moves, and finding a way out of the most hopeless situations. His tactical genius compensated for the lack of men and weapons, turning the Arabs' weaknesses into their strength. Interestingly, Khalid was officially removed from his position as commander-in-chief by Caliph Umar shortly before the battle. However, his authority among the soldiers was so unquestionable that the new commander, Abu Ubaidah, voluntarily ceded tactical command of the battle to him. This was a rare case in history when personal ambitions were set aside for the sake of a common victory. Khalid took command of the army at the most critical moment, when defeat seemed inevitable. Khalid reorganized the army, dividing it into infantry centers and powerful cavalry flanks. But his main innovation was the creation of a mobile guard, an elite cavalry unit under his personal command. This reserve was to serve as a fire brigade, instantly moving to the most dangerous sections of the front. It was this mobile group that would become the main instrument of victory in the upcoming battle. He understood that static defense against the Byzantine steamroller would lead to complete destruction. Therefore, Khalid relied on active defense, constant counterattacks, and exhausting the enemy. He forbade his soldiers from engaging in protracted positional battles, demanding that they remain in constant motion. His plan was risky, daring, and required every soldier to exert maximum effort. Khalid knew the psychology of his enemies well and skillfully exploited their fears and prejudices. He constantly changed the location of his troops, creating a false impression of the size of the Arab army among the Byzantines. Night raids, feigned retreats, and sudden attacks kept the imperial camp in a state of constant tension. He made the huge Roman army fear him without even engaging in actual combat. Before the battle, Khalid gave a speech that ignited the hearts of his warriors, reminding them of the paradise that awaited the fallen. He managed to unite the scattered tribes into a single fist, ready to crush the empire. His leadership was the secret ingredient that the Byzantines so desperately lacked. Don't forget to like this if you are interested in stories about the great strategists of the past. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how geography can kill? The site of the decisive battle was the Yarmouk Plain, bounded on three sides by natural obstacles. To the north and west, the plateau dropped into the deep canyons of the Yarmouk River and its tributary, Wadi Alan. These sheer cliffs, hundreds of meters high, were an insurmountable wall, a trap created by nature itself. Only one old Roman bridge connected the plateau to the rest of the world, becoming a narrow bottleneck. The Byzantines, confident in their strength, took up a position with their backs to these cliffs, considering them a reliable defense for their rear. Vagan believed that the canyons would protect his army from encirclement, allowing him to concentrate all his forces on a frontal attack. It was a classic mistake, confusing a defensive barrier with a prison wall. He had driven his huge army into a bag, the exit from which was controlled by the enemy. The Arabs took up a position opposite, leaving behind them the open space of the desert for a possible retreat. Khalid deliberately chose this location, knowing that if defeated, his men would disappear into the sands. But if the Byzantines fled, they would have nowhere to run except into the abyss. It was a strategic calculation based on detailed knowledge of the terrain. For almost a month, the two armies stood facing each other, hesitating to begin a general battle. It was a time of nervous tension, minor skirmishes, and diplomatic negotiations. The Byzantines tried to bribe the Arab commanders, offering gold and clothing in exchange for their departure. The Arabs rejected these offers, replying that they had come not for gold, but for the victory of their faith. Vagan hoped that time was on his side, and that the Arabs would run out of supplies or begin to fall apart. However, he did not take into account that his own huge army was consuming resources at an alarming rate. The sanitary conditions in the crowded Byzantine camp were deteriorating day by day. The heat, flies, and lack of clean water were beginning to undermine the health of the soldiers. Khalid used this time to study every hill and ravine on the future battlefield. He mapped out routes for the covert movement of his cavalry reserves. He knew where the ground was solid for hooves and where sand could slow down an attack. The battlefield became a chessboard for him, where he calculated all his moves in advance. Finally, realizing that he could not delay any longer, Vagan gave the order to attack. The huge machine of the empire set in motion, clanking with iron and raising dust. Heraclius from distant Antioch demanded results, and the general could wait no longer. None of them knew that nature had another surprise in store for them. What role do you think the weather will play in this battle? Watch the video to the end, and in the next chapter, you will learn how this great battle began. The battle began with the Byzantine champions stepping forward to challenge the Arab commanders to single combat. This ancient tradition served to raise morale and demonstrate valor before both armies. Several Byzantine officers were killed in these skirmishes, which was a bad omen for the imperial soldiers. After that, Vagan gave the order for a general infantry attack across the entire front. Tens of thousands of Byzantine infantrymen advanced in even rows, striking their swords against their shields. This thunderous sound was intended to strike terror into the hearts of their enemies. The Arabs met them with a hail of arrows, but the heavy Roman shields and armor provided reliable protection for the legionaries. The iron wall of the empire slowly advanced on the light Arab formations. The first blow was of terrible force, and the Arab infantry began to buckle under the incredible pressure. The Byzantines used their advantage in heavy weaponry, pushing the enemy back step by step. It seemed that the outcome of the battle was a foregone conclusion and that the Arab line was about to break. Vagan soldiers fought with professionalism and tenacity worthy of their ancestors. However, Khalid ibn al-Walid closely monitored the course of the battle from his command post. As soon as he saw that one of the flanks was beginning to give way, he personally led his mobile guard into the attack. A sudden strike by elite cavalry on the flank of the advancing Byzantines forced them to halt. The Arabs were able to restore their formation and push the enemy back to their original positions. This scenario was repeated several times during the first 2 days of the battle. The Byzantines attacked powerfully, breaking through the defenses, but each time they encountered Khalid's lightning-fast counterattacks. The sword of Allah rushed across the battlefield, patching holes in the defense and saving the situation at the very last moment. His presence instilled confidence in the Arab warriors that help would always come in time. Particularly fierce fighting broke out on the flanks, where Vagan attempted to encircle the Arab army. The Byzantine heavy cataphract cavalry rammed the Arab ranks but got bogged down in close combat. The Arabs used tactics of retreat and enticement, forcing the heavy horsemen to lose momentum. The light Arab horses were more maneuverable, allowing them to evade the blows. At night, the fighting subsided, and both armies returned to their camps to lick their wounds. The battlefield was littered with bodies and broken weapons, but neither side had achieved a decisive advantage. The Byzantines were disappointed that they had not been able to crush the savages in one blow. The Arabs, on the other hand, realized that they had stood up to the best army in the world, and this gave them strength. Are you ready for the shocking truth about how close Byzantium came to victory? On the third and fourth days of the battle, Vagan threw all his reserves into the fray, determined to break the Arabs' resistance at any cost. The blow was so powerful that the right flank of the Muslim army collapsed and fled. The Byzantine cataphracts broke through deep into the rear, approaching the Arab camp itself. It seemed that disaster was inevitable and the battle was lost. The Arab warriors, fleeing in panic, encountered an unexpected obstacle at their tents. They were met by their own wives and mothers, armed with stones and tent poles. The women shouted furiously at the men, accusing them of cowardice and demanding that they return to battle. This unexpected psychological blow proved stronger than the fear of Byzantine swords. The ashamed warriors turned around and rushed back at the enemy with redoubled fury. At the same time, Khalid again struck the flank of the breakthrough Byzantines with his mobile guard. Caught between Khalid's counterattacking infantry and cavalry, the Romans were forced to retreat with heavy losses. The crisis was overcome, but it took a tremendous effort. On the other flank, the situation was no less critical. Arab archers employed a brutal tactic, aiming exclusively at the eyes of Byzantine soldiers. This day went down in Arab history as the Day of Lost Eyes. Hundreds of Byzantines were blinded and incapacitated, causing panic in their ranks. However, the discipline of the legions allowed them to maintain their formation even under such fierce fire. Khalid understood that it was impossible to patch up the holes in the defense indefinitely. His men were exhausted after 4 days of continuous fighting under the scorching sun. The Byzantines also suffered heavy losses, but they still had a numerical advantage. The battle turned into a bloody meat grinder of attrition. It was at this moment that the main weakness of the Byzantine army became apparent: its lack of flexibility. Vagan continued to press forward with his massed forces without trying to come up with anything new. He believed that one more effort would break through the dam, but every time victory seemed close, the elusive Khalid appeared before him. Both armies were on the verge of physical and moral exhaustion. Who would blink first in this standoff? Watch the video to the end, and in the next chapter you will learn about the fatal mistake made by the Byzantine commander. On the fifth day of the battle, an event occurred that determined the outcome of the entire battle. Seeing the fatigue of his troops, the Byzantine commander Vagan sent an envoy to Khalid with an offer of a truce for several days. He wanted to give his soldiers a rest, regroup his forces, and possibly wait for new reinforcements. For the classical military science of the time, this was a reasonable and logical step. However, for Khalid ibn al-Walid, this proposal was the signal he had been waiting for. He understood that the enemy was broken, tired, and afraid. If the Byzantines were asking for a respite, it meant that they had already lost psychologically. Giving them time to recover would be a crime. Khalid categorically rejected the offer of a truce. Instead of resting, he gave the order for everyone to prepare for a decisive offensive. That night, he regrouped his entire cavalry, combining all the scattered units into a single powerful force. About 8,000 horsemen were gathered together to deliver one crushing blow. It was a risk, as the infantry was left without cover, but Khalid went all in. Vagan, having received a refusal, was confused. He did not expect such audacity from a smaller army. The Byzantines, who were counting on a respite, were demoralized by the need to go into battle again. Rumors spread among their ranks about betrayal and that the commanders did not know what to do. Khalid understood that the next day would be his last. Either he would destroy the Byzantine army or he would die himself. The plan was simple and ingenious. Cut off the Byzantine cavalry from the infantry and surround the main body of the army. To do this, he had to use all his reserves and all his cunning. The Arab camp was filled with extraordinary excitement. The warriors sharpened their swords, checked their horses' harnesses, and prayed. They felt that the denouement was near. Khalid rode among the ranks of his soldiers, encouraging them and explaining the task at hand. Everyone knew their maneuver and their place in the formation. Meanwhile, the Byzantine infantry, lacking confidence in their command, prepared for defense. They were still a formidable force, but without faith in victory, even the strongest armor becomes fragile. The soldiers looked anxiously at the dark horizon from which the storm was to come. On the sixth day of the battle, nature itself seemed to take the side of the Arab army. A strong wind blew from the south, quickly turning into a veritable sandstorm. Clouds of hot sand and dust rushed straight into the faces of the Byzantine soldiers, blinding them and taking their breath away. The Arabs, standing with their backs to the wind, found themselves in a privileged position. Khalid immediately took advantage of this gift from heaven. He launched a massive attack with his entire combined cavalry on the left flank of the Byzantines. Under cover of the dusty veil, the Arab horsemen descended on the unsuspecting enemy. The Byzantine cavalry, blinded and disorganized, could not withstand this blow and began to retreat. The Arabs acted in a coordinated and ruthless manner, pushing the Roman cavalry further and further away from the infantry. Soon, the Byzantine cavalry was completely defeated and fled the battlefield to the north, abandoning their infantry to their fate. The huge mass of infantry was left without cover and without eyes, in complete chaos amid a dust storm. At the same time, the center and right flank of the Arabs went on the offensive. The Byzantine soldiers, unable to see the enemy or each other, fought blindly. The officers' commands were drowned out by the roar of the wind and the clang of weapons. The legions broke up into separate groups which tried to defend themselves but were doomed. Khalid implemented his plan to encircle the enemy. His cavalry, having dealt with the enemy's horsemen, entered the rear of the Byzantine infantry. The Romans found themselves caught in a pincer movement. In front of them was the attacking Arab infantry. Behind them was Khalid's cavalry, and on their flanks were the sheer cliffs of the canyons. Panic swept through the ranks of the imperial army. The soldiers, who just yesterday had been the pride of Rome, turned into an uncontrollable mob. They threw down their heavy shields and spears, trying to flee, but there was nowhere to run. A dust storm hid the scale of the disaster even from the participants themselves, creating a nightmarish atmosphere. The final act of the tragedy unfolded at the only route of retreat, the old bridge across Wadi Ruqad. Khalid, anticipating the Byzantines' flight, had sent a detachment of 500 horsemen ahead to capture the bridge at night. When the panicked Byzantine crowds rushed to the crossing, they found their path cut off. Trapped between the steep cliffs of the deep gorges, the soldiers fell into complete despair. Behind them was the advancing Arab army, and ahead of them was the abyss. Under pressure from the crowd pushing behind them, the front ranks began to fall into the gorge. People were falling off the rocks, dropping to the bottom of the canyon by the hundreds. What happened next was no longer a battle, but a methodical destruction. The Byzantine infantry, having lost their formation and command, could not offer any worthy resistance. The Arabs pushed them towards the cliffs, and many preferred death from falling to capture or the sword. The Yarmouk River and its tributaries were clogged with bodies. The waters turned red. Historians describe this scene as one of the most terrible disasters in military history. Tens of thousands of soldiers died within a few hours, unable to defend themselves. Generals, including Vagan and Triftius, died in this massacre or while trying to escape. The entire top brass of the Byzantine command in the east was destroyed in a single day. The imperial army was not just defeated, it was annihilated. Only a pitiful handful of soldiers managed to escape by hiding in ravines or crossing the river at other places. But as a fighting force, the Byzantine army ceased to exist. All the baggage trains, treasury, and equipment fell to the victors. For the Arabs, this victory was absolute and stunning. They captured enormous spoils, but most importantly, they destroyed the only force capable of stopping their advance. The way to Syria, Palestine, and Egypt was open. News of the disaster at Yarmouk reached Emperor Heraclius in Antioch. The old ruler, who had spent his life rebuilding the empire and returning the true cross, was devastated. He realized that he no longer had the resources to create a new army. The treasury was empty, and human reserves were exhausted. Heraclius made the difficult decision to leave Syria and retreat behind the Taurus Mountains in order to protect at least Anatolia, the heart of the empire. According to legend, as he left Antioch, he uttered the famous phrase, "Farewell, Syria, beautiful province. What an excellent enemy you will be to the enemy." These words express the bitterness of loss and the admission of defeat. After Yarmouk, the cities of Syria and Palestine surrendered one after another. Damascus, Jerusalem, and Aleppo opened their gates to the victors. They no longer had any hope of help from Constantinople. The local population, tired of high taxes and religious disputes with Byzantium, often welcomed the Arabs not as conquerors but as liberators. The Battle of Yarmouk was a watershed moment in world history. It put an end to centuries of Greco-Roman rule in the Middle East. The Christian Empire was replaced by the Islamic Caliphate, which began its rapid rise. The cultural and religious landscape of the region changed forever. The lands where Christianity originated came under Muslim rule. Language, religion, and administration began to change, shaping the Middle East we know today. For Byzantium, this was the beginning of a long, centuries-long retreat. The empire survived, but it lost its richest provinces and its status as the sole superpower forever. It became a regional state, forced to fight for survival forever. The story of the Battle of Yarmouk is not just a tale of military tactics. It is a drama of human ambition, mistakes, and heroism. We saw how self-confidence and rigidity can lose out to flexibility and faith, how a single dust storm and one brilliant maneuver can tip the scales of history. It is a reminder that nothing in history is predetermined, and the fate of empires often hangs in the balance. Do you think Byzantium could have avoided this defeat if it had chosen a different tactic? Or was the outcome predetermined by the decline of the old empire and the passion of the new power? Write your thoughts in the comments, suggest topics for future analyses of great battles, and be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss new journeys into the past.